Intelligence High School Debate.
Hello and welcome to Intelligence High School Debate. I'm your host, Misorang. What gets your heart beating? I think my heart was racing the very first time I stood in front of the TV camera. I was very excited but also terribly nervous at the same time. Many years have passed since then, but I've been getting just as excited as that time these days because of the bright students on our program. This is the 8th and last episode of the preliminary round, so let's get right into it. First, here are the rules.
This tournament adapts the British parliamentary style. The debate consists of 4 teams of 2 speakers with 2 teams on either side of the case. Each speaker should deliver a 5-minute speech, and teams gain points individually even if on the same side. The first and last minute of each speech is protected from the point of information.
Time to meet our students. Teams and sides are chosen by drawing lots, so please select a scroll. It will have your team position written on it. First up are Anyang Foreign Language High School students, 11th grader Kim Soo-min and 12th grader Lee Hyun-soo. Their scroll reads, Opening Opposition. Next are 11th graders Jung Jin-woo and Hyun Jae-ik from Sehwa High School. Please select a scroll. They have chosen Closing Government. Continuing on, Dongtan Global High School students, 11th graders Kim Yoo-jin and Kim Hye-rin. Let's see what scroll they have selected. Closing Opposition. And that, of course, means that GyeonggiBuk Science High School students, 10th graders Sim Gyu-min and Yoo Jae-sang, have been selecting the Opening Government.
Actually, or even though having a competition at the piece and then improving this. We believe that there needs to be a policy and with the policy in action which makes sure that
voluntary euthanasia should not be legalized. Ladies and gentlemen,
Okay, those were your 4 teams, so time to meet our 3 judges. First, Professor Joshua Park. He is a member of the Executive Committee of the World Schools Debating Championships. Next, we have Professor Kang Yong-seung from Yonsei University Law School. And we're also joined by Professor Jan Gallis from the Philippines, who is the director of the Asian Debate Institute. And last but not least, we are joined by 50 audience judges, students from Seongnam Foreign Language High School. Hello and welcome to our show. Our audience judges will give feedback in the form of green lights, which they will turn on when they agree with the speaker. All right, let's check out the motion for today's debate.
Voluntary euthanasia is the practice of intentionally ending a life in a painless manner. It can quickly and humanely end a patient's suffering and terminal pain, allowing them to die with dignity. However, some claim that euthanasia and assisted suicide leads to suicide contagion, which is a rejection of the importance and value of human life. Will voluntary euthanasia allow individuals to die with dignity, or will it be just mercy killing? This House would legalize voluntary euthanasia.
We live in an age where we can control almost every aspect of our lives, from when and who we marry to what sort of work we do and until when. So what about death? Should we be able to choose when and how we die? What about the right to die with dignity? That sounds like the makings of a debate, so let's have it. First, the Prime Minister. Please step up to the podium.
many people would be the opposite side of the voluntary euthanasia. They say that euthanasia is kind of murder and could be misused in criminally. However, we, the government, are standing for legalizing voluntary euthanasia by suggesting 5 reasons. First of all, euthanasia makes patients comfortable. Sympathizing with pain is very hard unless we personally experience the pain. So we could not exactly know the pain of critical patients. When we see them, maybe we would think they are not suffering because they are not moving. But actually, even though the patient is vegetable, they are suffering mentally. We have to allow euthanasia to reduce the patient's pain. Second, cost using in life conservation is enormous. It will make sense if the patient could be healthy by the treatment. But if the treatment is for only extending the life, it makes no sense. Also, it needs a lot of money to extend the life. So, treatment will be a financial burden to family. Third, paradoxically, euthanasia can save someone's life. Patient who is dead by euthanasia can donate the organ to sick people. So, we can not only reduce the pain of the crucial patient, but also spare one's life. And the fourth and last reason is the counterargument of the opposite side. The opposite side of the euthanasia says that euthanasia is a kind of murder. But I think euthanasia and murder is basically different. Murder gives the pain to the victim, but in the other hand, euthanasia is one's pain. Also, the opposite side will say that it is not moral to kill a person without patient's opinion. But it is important that our topic is not just euthanasia, but voluntary euthanasia. I think we should respect one's choice. In conclusion, I assume that euthanasia system is not perfect. However, as I have mentioned, euthanasia could reduce patients' pain and lessens the family's financial burden and saves one's life by donating organs. And to emphasize one more time,
Sir.
yes.
You said it's a voluntary euthanasia. Then how can people in the vegetation state make a volunteering to take euthanasia or not?
So I say that I assume that euthanasia system is not perfect by this reason. But if we
That's okay.
if we make I know it is not perfect because of the reason, but if we
That's okay. If you can try to explain it in other words, maybe.
so I think it is important to gain the person's opinion before the accident. And to emphasize one more time, euthanasia is not a murder, and we have to respect one's choice. For these 5 reasons, the government is on the pros of the voluntary euthanasia. Thank you.
Okay, that was the Prime Minister arguing for the motion, arguing that governments should allow voluntary euthanasia. One of the issues raised was that allowing people to die with dignity is kinder than forcing them to continue their lives in pain. You may take your seat. Okay, let's see how many of our audience judges agreed with the Prime Minister. 16 out of 50. Okay, let's see if our leader of opposition can do better. Please step up to the podium.
Ladies and gentlemen, we the opposition side strongly believes today's motion to not be passed understands that sanctity of life cannot in any way be neglected, and also it's the government's responsibility to make every one of the citizens' lives as an important value. But before moving on to my speech, I would like to make some rebuttals to the previous speaker. First of all, they said that euthanasia can help those patients who are suffering to gain comfort. However, we believe that comfort of the patient cannot be the reason for the patients to give up their lives that easily. Lives are something that should be valued at the first priority. And because today's debate is a policy debate, not a value debate, we believe that policy should be made rationally, not irrationally, because of just the reason of the patient suffering. And next is they said, they extended this argument with the patients being healthy again. We believe that they are conveniently ignoring the patient who are in a vegetable state, who has the possibility to gain their health again. Those who are in the vegetation state do have a little possibilities to gain their health again. So by that, when neglecting this and encourage those patients to get euthanasia, we believe that can lead to a misuse. And third of all, they said that voluntary euthanasia. We believe, as I said in my POI, we believe today's policy itself is a flaw because those people who are in the euthanasia, who take euthanasia, are people who have to be in the state of vegetation, who cannot really do not really have a conscious state, which means that it's really hard for them to volunteer whether or not to take euthanasia or not.
Point of information.
No, thank you. So moving on to my speech, we have two arguments to support our team's stance. First is about the government's role regarding to the sanctity of life. And second is about the realistic harms and the side effects of today's policy. Ladies and gentlemen, in today's debate, the government and the opposition believes that it is the citizens that should be the first priority and the utmost value. However, we want to then ask a question if opening the patient's right to die and encouraging euthanasia even as their last resort is really what the government should do for their citizens. Ladies and gentlemen, our government's responsibility in today's debate is not to encourage death to those patients, but to show them that their lives are something that should not be given up, and something to treasure even in their worst situation, and also to practice this value. However, today's policy is totally against the message that the government has to deliver to their citizens. Then I would like to prove why sanctity of life is important and how it can go upon the patient's right. Ladies and gentlemen, life is something that we cannot attain with our own will. It's the very essence of a human being, and as it's the very basis of every right, it's definitely necessary for the government to protect this right. Nowadays, suicide is a big issue. By that, we government are giving educations, or making campaigns, and even making commercials to always inform the basic right for the people to live. The sanctity of life, to every citizen, we say it is the sanctity of life. When ignoring this, and encourage them to do euthanasia, we say it is the same as encouraging them to suicide.
POI, sir.
Yes.
Are you saying that suicide is like euthanasia?
Of course, and I would like to explain that in my argument. So I would like to explain why suicide can be same as euthanasia. Because euthanasia, even though it is voluntary choice, it is an irrational choice because of their just suffering, as they said. They suffer, and that's the reason why they make euthanasia. Patients make this decision only for the reason to end their sufferings. Then suicide. People commit suicide with their own choice, such as today's policy. And why do they make suicide? Is because they want to end their sufferings in their daily lives. But when we government allow euthanasia, when we government allow euthanasia, and when we government on the other side try to prevent people from committing suicide, we say that's a huge irony, and this is totally an absurd argument. However, ladies and gentlemen, we want to inform all the floor members that we are not neglecting the pain of the patients that end their sufferings. However, we believe that it is the basic duty of the government to rescue people from making inadequate death, and believe it is morally right for us, the government, to not pass today's policy. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're really proud to prove today's argument, which was government's role regarding to the sanctity of life, and I'm very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Okay, that was the leader of opposition arguing against the motion, so arguing that government should not legalize voluntary euthanasia. According to the speaker, doing so would, among other things, devalue the sanctity of life. Okay, let's check out the audience response. 28, so higher than the Prime Minister. All right, let's continue on. Deputy Prime Minister, it's your turn.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am deputy of the deputy of the opening government, and I'm going to start with some of the opposition to what have the leading opposition have mentioned. First of all, they have mentioned that the sanctity of life should be valued in everything comes first. However, the voluntary euthanasia is not the is actually a form of improving the sanctity of life. If a person have chosen to the euthanasia, in order to reduce the pain, and then or like just leaving them alone to have suffering from the pain is actually like ignoring their sanctity of life. Furthermore, that the opposing government have mentioned the suicide and the euthanasia is same with this kind of enduring the suffering and the enduring of the suffering from the diseases. However, it is fundamentally different. That people who commit suicide is just because of their mental problems, and it can be resolved with the other social like methods, like asking people to have for the solutions or having a conversation with the other people and then improving this society. However, the person
POI,
who
sir.
was that it?
You have mentioned that people can overcome their suicidal thoughts by having education or asking for advice. However, in our society, is it really practical? I think that your suggestion is very idealistic because most of them commit suicide because they can't attain these education and they don't feel the need to take any education.
Actually, it is because of our society, and I think it is our duty to just change our society to my idealistic way. Because like many people think that people cannot have the solutions by asking asking to the people who is around them. However, by asking the questions about the problems with the teachers around them or the calling to the other people who can help us, actually is beneficial. Also, I have mentioned that the suicide is different from the committing. From the euthanasia. Euthanasia is usually made when the people cannot suffer under the disease anymore, and then like when it is like it is almost impossible to be cured. It is the case that is usually euthanasia is made. So I think it is fundamentally different from it. Also, the opposition have mentioned that the euthanasia can be misused. However, euthanasia, if it regulated by having by asking people whether they have by just getting the agreement of the people who sells.
POI?
Yep.
Yes, not only it can be misused, but the first speaker responded in my POI that euthanasia itself is not perfect. And how can euthanasia always guarantee those sanctity of life, those comfort of the patients?
Okay, so as our Prime Minister have mentioned, it is important to, it can be resolved by just having a agreement before the accident, like whether if I have a serious pain and then like I almost agree to the euthanasia. Also, so you have said that can be misused. So according by posing our opinion, like if it regulates the people, like if they have it is mandatory for them to have a agreement before the performance of the euthanasia, and like asking the variety of doctors to before having a euthanasia that there are no percentage of the disease to be cured. Also, if we ask the families who is around them and like they also have a problem, also can have a problem by suffering under the by looking at the patients suffering under the pain. And if they agree to, if family agrees to have a euthanasia, I think this is it can be one solution to it. So for these reasons, I think the voluntary euthanasia have to be passed.
Okay, that was a Deputy Prime Minister arguing for the motion, arguing the government should allow voluntary euthanasia. In his argument, he rebutted some of the Leader of Opposition's argument by stating that suicide and euthanasia are fundamentally different. Okay, let's see the total number of green lights. It is 18 out of 50, putting the total for the opening government at 34 out of 100. Well done. All right, moving on to the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Please step up to the podium.
Ladies and gentlemen, as a Deputy Leader of Opposition, I like to say the sanctity of life can never be neglected, and it is the government's prior responsibility to value every one of the citizens' life. Before I move on to our second argument, I'd like to first make some rebuttals about the previous speaker. The previous speaker have stated that if a person chooses to die, leaving them alone is more ignoring the sanctity of a person. However, ladies and gentlemen, in the POI and rebuttal previously made by our team, we already asked them to give any specific solutions and to give us the ways how we can choose the way to die. We say that most of the patients or people who choose to die or who choose to have the euthanasia are too sick to have their rationality alive and to choose that if they will die or not. Therefore, even though we asked them again and again about how they will choose to die, they did not give us any answers about this. Also, the previous speaker have stated that if we have to change the society, we should change the society in the idealistic way. We agree that society should change, and the society should change, and it would be good if we can change the society in the idealistic way. However, ladies and gentlemen, they didn't give me any solutions or precise ones or ideas. There should be precise ideas if we want to change something, and if we think something is completely wrong. Also, the previous speaker have stated that mandatory to get the argument is really important, and we can ask the doctors and we can ask the families about the ideas of if we should have the euthanasia or not. We agree about this idea, but in the later debate, we will prove why it is not appropriate idea to ask the doctors and families about euthanasia, and also it is the human's right that can be only respected when the human can decide if they themselves will die or not. Now, I'd like to move on to our team's argument. Our team's second argument is about the realistic harm and side effects of euthanasia. The biggest worry is that a right to die will create a silent form of coercion that cannot be dictated by the government and society officially. In the aging society, elders' value and their contribution is all too likely to be masked by the issue of the cost placed on the working age. Even where older people do not face pressure from their families, society needs to be aware about the wider narrative. Such a narrative will slow the creation of norm where elderly feel that they are burdened and is expected that they will exercise their right to die, which is actually not a right, a big burden to them. Once the right to die is normalized, those exercising it may not even consider that what they are doing is not really of their free will. Perceiving oneself as a burden is already a common cause of suicide in this society. Not having a right will stop the life negligence tendency going on further towards the creation of culture where individuals consider it normal that they should die when they feel a burden or hardships in their life. And we can think about another example about euthanasia. All of you will have heard about the Second War and Nazis who had a big Holocaust, the most vicious things human beings have ever made in this society and this history. Yes, right, big Holocaust. The Nazis in the Second War have killed thousands and millions of people only in the reason of euthanasia. We know that the Jews were killed and they were murdered. They didn't choose to die, or we know that they really wanted to live. However, the things they did, the really vicious actions they have committed is generalized and is okay by the name of euthanasia. Since euthanasia was allowed and legalized at that time, they say Holocaust was only a part of euthanasia, that they should have killed the burdens of society and they should have killed and eliminated the people who harmed the society. And also, we can think another part, because we cannot guarantee that this kind of vicious incident, like what Nazis have done, will never happen again. And we, the opposition side, say that allowing euthanasia and legalizing euthanasia will make more harms and this kind of vicious incidents later on. We can think about the benefits that other family members or people will gain from euthanasia. There are still people who are going to make side effects by the euthanasia. For example, we can think of the insurance and inheritance. People, the family members who want the money and who want something from the dead person and dead family members can have a murder and killing on the name of euthanasia. Some vegetables or sick people, since they cannot think well, the euthanasia will be decided by the family members or a doctor who was dictating them. And even when they have the consciousness, they can decide by themselves because of the pressure made by families and because of the pressure made by money and economic parts, they will likely to be forced to make a voluntary choice, which is euthanasia and the death of their life. Therefore, by this, we believe we, the opening opposition, have clearly stated and well proved why we take the realistic and moral high ground of this debate. Thank you.
Okay, that was the Deputy Leader of Opposition arguing against the motion, and in laying out the reasons for why government should not legalize voluntary euthanasia, she mentioned that a right to die for some may very well become a duty to die by others, particularly those who are vulnerable or dependent upon their family members. Okay, the magic number we need to see is more than 6 to beat the opening government, 32. 32 out of 50 audience judges agree with the deputy leader of opposition, putting the total at 60 out of 100 for the opening opposition. Well done. The top half of the debate is now complete, but before we move on to the closing teams, let's first hear from our 3 judges on how they saw the debate so far. Professor Jan Gellis.
All right, so for the opening government side, I think you were hinting that all of these arguments are, hinged on the idea of choice. So I think we need to discuss that also. Like, when do we say that someone is actually giving a meaningful choice? I think a criteria, a discussion on what are these, reasons for us to say that, yes, that's a meaningful choice, must be discussed at the first speech so that it would be easier for us to, discuss all the consequential ideas that you wanted to mention at the end.
So let me comment on the opening opposition. I thought you did a good job both of setting out your primary principles and arguments and also being reactive to what the government had said. With respect to the sanctity of life, I mean, obviously, a slogan like that is very hard to rebut against. But, I mean, repeating it doesn't make it more contentful. So explaining why, in this case, permitting a policy of euthanasia would not be respectful of the sanctity of life or would compromise it, or explaining exactly where that value lies, a little bit more elaboration rather than just repeating the slogan, I think would have been helpful.
I did feel that both teams tried to engage opening government to the extent that you were even preempting some of the arguments that you thought the opposition side may come up with. But then when there were issues that came up that you weren't expecting, maybe the flexibility and on-your-feet response wasn't quite there. But then the DPM did a pretty good job of perhaps picking the Prime Minister up, coming up with the concept of prior agreements, which the closing government later on called living will.
Thank you for your insight. We now move on to the closing half of today's debate. And to start us off, I would like to invite the member of government up to the podium.
This is the MG of the closing opposition, and we of the closing opposition would like to propose the motion: voluntary euthanasia should be allowed. Before I get to my arguments, let me rebut some of the stuff that the opening opposition has stated. The opening opposition has stated that. The opening opposition has stated that. I'll just get to my arguments. The first argument I have is that the first argument is that we should allow people painless death, and peaceful death is much better than painful suffering. And our second is that patients have a choice. We have to respect the patient's choice and give them chance to have their own choice rather than living a life of endless pain. And also, the government has absolutely no right to stop patients from ending their own lives. It is the patient's own choice, and it is something that we should respect. And if we do not give them a choice to end their lives in terms of suffering, it is not giving them a choice, and it will go against the freedom. As stated in the Korea's Constitution Article Note 10, we must guarantee the right of people to seek happiness, and this also means that we have to guarantee the right of people to avoid pain. So this means that if we go with policy, then giving them a right to choose euthanasia is going with the policy, and I would like to therefore rebut the opposition's case. Going with our second. Before I go to a second argument, I would like to state some stuff that states some what the proposition has failed to provide in the first clash. The opening opposition has asked the question: what about the vegetarian stated people who are unable to answer if they will choose euthanasia? I would like to say give a new idea that we would be able to use. I believe with if we make a living will, which means that a person before the person suffers an accident has the ability to has the choice to make a will, whether or not.
Sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Then are you stating that we can make a living will that by expecting our future that we will have an accident or not?
Yes, I believe it is really actually possible, and of course, everybody before they get into actually when they are living a normal life, they can freely choose to have a will, whether or not they accept the enthusiasm before they get into an accident. I think it is necessary if we go, and it is really realistic, and this will be able to, if we use this, I think even if the vegetarians, people enter the vegetarian state, I think it will be used for good. And as for, so in this current society, with the advance of science and technology, people live much longer than ever. And this may look like a good thing, but how in reality, people are being forced to continue their lives through great suffering and through the help of technology and machines. I believe that living a life that attached to a machine and living a painful day over and over is not considered a life. I think we have to respect the patients and give them a choice give them a choice. It is not taking away their lives. It is merely giving them another choice to end their lives instead of suffering. And in this way, I believe that patients' freedom is truly respected if we accept this enthusiasm. So I have stated the arguments of the closing opposition and rebutted some of the arguments from the opening opposition. Thank you very much.
Okay, that was the member of government arguing for the motion and in outlining why government should legalize voluntary euthanasia. He gave the autonomy argument that every patient has the right to decide when to die, and that this right is protected in the case of Korea by the Constitution. Okay, let's see how many lights have been switched on for the member of government. 20. So exactly 40% of our audience judges agreed with the member of government. All right, member of opposition, it's your turn.
As the member of the opposition, I'm here to oppose to the motion to legalize voluntary euthanasia. But before we move on to our arguments and before I elaborate on our arguments, I would like to offer a rebuttal to the proposition team. First of all, they have mentioned that the humans have the right to make their own decisions, and this has to be supported by one's consent. However, we question the proposition about what about the people in vegetation state. They have mentioned that this policy regarding euthanasia, voluntary euthanasia, has some flaws in it, and that is not perfect. Regarding this argument, we are questioning ourselves. If there are no direct guidelines, if there are no direct restrictions regarding these euthanasia policy, then are we valuing one's decision much more than one's life? So I think that is a flaw. And then another thing is that a long-term solution is not supported, and they have mentioned that the living will can be a solution for people of vegetation state. However, there's a flaw in living wills because, first of all, living wills regularly fail to have their intended effect, and most of the people do not have living wills in the first place because living wills is very idealistic policy, and the people do not know when they're going to die. So,
QI, ma'am.
Sir?
So what I'm saying is that if we develop this euthanasia, we are going to make all of the people go through this living will, and in that way, I think we can say that euthanasia will be helpful. Yes.
Okay, but first of all, how do the patients know that whenever he comes to the state of wanting euthanasia, how does he know that he wants certain euthanasia? And also in the living wills, not too often do not reach the people actually making decisions for incompetent patients, and the living wills do not increase the accuracy with which surrogates identification of patients' preferences. And also moving on to the elaboration of our opposition's arguments. Our first argument was that the government has the right to care for the citizens' life, and this means that the opposition believe that the government has the right to intervene in a citizen's life to make them realize how valuable life is. And since we are promoting save your lives, and promoting not to commit suicide thoughts, we are showing us the citizens to not use euthanasia, and promoting the harmful aspects of euthanasia. And also what they're neglecting is that the government is not trying to make the people suffer from not getting euthanasia, because keeping this illegal means that no government can use it for political means. And then our second argument was that the social groups are at risk of abuse. For example, like we mentioned, such elderly people end up having their lives terminated because selfish relatives want their inheritance and want their money after their death.
Point of information.
Sir.
So you have mentioned that it can be overused by the persons to my own sake, but the euthanasia is not only that case. Actually, euthanasia can be regulated by the person.
Sorry, time's up.
You may continue because the point of information was raised before the minute.
So the euthanasia can be regulated by the getting the agreement of the student of the persons, and by getting the agreement of the doctors that this disease cannot be cured by further treatment. How do you think of it?
Okay, like we mentioned in the second argument, we have said that people undergo through pressure from their families and relatives, saying that they feel as a pressure and a burden in the society, so they just commit suicide. This is like an involuntary euthanasia disguised as voluntary euthanasia, which means that they are not committing euthanasia by their own will. So I think the society and also the relatives have a problem causing this euthanasia. And also, this could lead to the slippery slope of euthanasia by abusing this medicine and abusing this policy for their own will, for other people's will, and not their own will. Thank you.
Okay, that was a member of opposition arguing against the motion. And in her argument, she said that the door to voluntary euthanasia is very possibly the same door to involuntary or forced euthanasia. So let's see how many of our audiences agree with the speaker. 13, so 26% of our audience judges agree with the member of opposition. All right, continuing on with the last speaker from the government bench, the government whip. Please step up to the podium.
So this is the government whip of the closing government, and we'd like to legalize euthanasia when it is voluntary. So first, rebutting the opposition. So the opposition argument consists of three main arguments. The first one being life being an important value. The second being that people in their vegetation states cannot make their own decisions. And third, you've compared how euthanasia can be similar to suicide, and how doing euthanasia can cause a slippery slope effect, and eventually make people think that life isn't an important value. So we'll rebut each argument. So first, the leading opposition said that life is an important value. We couldn't agree more to that statement. So we also believe that life is an important value, which is a dignity which is given to everyone. However, we believe that by extending life beyond the will or ability of the person, then that's compromising that dignity. So we believe that we must give the choice for the person to choose between euthanasia. And furthermore, by legalizing euthanasia, we never said that we are getting rid of palliative care. So the person still has the choice to choose between euthanasia and palliative care, which sustains their life. And secondly, you guys keep coming back with the argument about people in their vegetation state, people who don't have the rational mind to decide about their own lives. To that, I respond by suggesting that the relatives decide, and the living will argument. And I'll back up these arguments. So relatives, you said that the lives of people can only be decided by themselves because life is such an important value. However, it might be the life of the person who is in suffering. However, it is the families who are supporting the person. It's the families who have to financially support.
POI, sir.
Yes.
And are you allowing all the person who want to die in the society to choose to die and then after to die?
We believe that there needs to be a policy in action which makes sure that the doctor and the patient have to agree on euthanasia in case the patient has consciousness in order for the euthanasia to take place. And if the patient isn't conscious, then the relatives can decide because it is the relatives who are supporting the medication. And secondly, if there is a living will which states that the person will take euthanasia, then they'll take the euthanasia. And third,
POI, sir.
yes.
What is the difference between those second person who are like the relatives or families, allowing them to take euthanasia, and the difference in when the government allows and not allows them to take euthanasia? What's the difference between the intervention?
I'll continue with that on my other points. So third, citizen is the first priority. We agree with that as well. However, isn't illegalizing euthanasia making the government intervene in the person's personal end-of-life decision? By making euthanasia illegal, the person doesn't have a choice in their life. So it's that way. The government is actually forcing the person to live on even when they don't want to live. Isn't that the government intervening? And you also mentioned that we are encouraging euthanasia. Never do we say that we are encouraging euthanasia. We are just adding the choice of euthanasia in the limited things that a person who is dying, who is suffering, can do.
POI, sir.
Not accepted. Finally, comparing euthanasia with suicide or Holocaust, I think that's going a bit too far. I mean, it's about voluntary euthanasia. It's not about killing someone who doesn't agree with it. So we are thus guaranteeing the right stated, not accepted. Thus, we are guaranteeing the right stated in the Constitution, Article number 10 and Article number 37. And further on to continue with to summarize our points. First, we should allow peaceful death over painful suffering. And second, it's the patient's choice and it's the patient's liberty to choose, which is also being supported by the Constitution. And third, the government can't be involved in the end-of-life decision of people. And fourth, euthanasia is not putting an end to palliative care it's not putting an end to palliative care, it's adding choice. And fifth, it saves money for healthcare. It allows other people who want to live to get the healthcare that they need instead of wasting money on people who want to die and have a peaceful death. And finally, human life is a dignity not to be compromised through forceful extension. Thank you.
Okay, that was the last speaker from the government bench, the government whip. And in his argument, he mentioned that euthanasia or legalizing euthanasia is just about adding one additional option in addition to the existing options of palliative care and hospice care. I'm seeing that almost all the lights have been switched on. Let's see the exact number, 39 out of 50. So almost 80% of our audience judges agree. That puts the total at 59 out of 100 for the closing government. Well done. All right, the last speaker of today's debate, the opposition whip. Please step up to the podium.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the opposition whip. Before I clarify today's clashes and prove why the opposition had made more logical and persuasive during this debate, I would like to offer some rebuttals for the government. First of all, they had said that the healthcare system like palliative care can be the alternative. However, the palliative care can impede the growth of hospice movement and cause the thoughts like, why should I worry about palliation care when I have euthanasia? And the opposition's arguments cannot be justified in this case. And coming to the clashes, there are mainly three clashes in today's debate. First was about defining the term about voluntary and about the government role and about the patient suffering. First, about the voluntary term, the government has stated that voluntary euthanasia means that the patients have choice to live or die. However, the opposition has stated the people and patients who are incompetent not make the right decisions. And although they can make decisions by the relatives or doctors? Is it a true or pure decision without any interference of the circumstances? So we want to question about that. And second one is about the government role. In this part, the government didn't give any practical rebuttals regarding the government and challenges the duties about the government, so which is the fundamental issue. And third one about the patient suffering. The government has said that the patients can be comfortable due to the euthanasia. However, the policy, the opposition has strongly said that the policy should be made rationally rather than regarding the value, just the value about the comfort. So in this part, the opposition has taken this point. We, the opposition, strongly believes that the voluntary euthanasia should not be legalized. Ladies and gentlemen, what we must consider is the true purpose of the law against euthanasia, and the opponents are arguing that the government has the duty to protect patients from abuse, and this is not intended to make anyone to suffer, but to protect the patients from the abuse. As we have kept mentioned, human life in living bodies and commands respect by its very nature, and life is the essence of the human being. The government has the fundamental duty to protect the citizens' right to live, and rather than legalizing the possibilities of abuse and committing suicide and serious violations about human rights. Once again, I want to emphasize that the sanctity of life will never be neglected. There's no such evidence that the patients have been decided when they prefer to die or not, without any pressure. And about the case about the living wills, although the government has stated that the living wills can be the solution, this cannot be the proper evidence because it has some flaws. Since the most people don't have the living wills and they don't contain the preferences that accurately decides that they want to die or not in the future. The most influential thing against the voluntary euthanasia is the slippery slope, and this means that the society will lead to the permitting actions that are morally wrong. For example, sick elderly people end up having their lives terminated because selfish relatives and cousins don't want to look after them, or out of greed for inheritance money. If there's no restriction in place, we cannot guarantee if the negative outcomes like we have already said, Nazis, would happen again. So therefore, we, the opposition, strongly is against today's motion. And the last, I would like to give you a quote about this issue. Once we allow doctors to kill patients, we will not be able to limit the killing to those who want to die. This is the quote from the philosopher Peter Singer, and this justifies that the government cannot let people to die without people, and the government has the duty to protect people's life and people's the essence rights. Therefore, we, the opposition, strongly oppose to today's motion, and I'm very probably sure that we have taken this debate today. Thank you.
Okay, that was the opposition whip. You may sit down. That was the last speaker of today's debate, and in her argument, she said that the government has the duty to protect its people, and that voluntary euthanasia will possibly give doctors the power to play God and decide whether a patient's life is worth living or not. So let's see how persuasive her speech was. 33 out of 50. That puts the grand total for the closing opposition at 46 out of 100 lights. All right, all 8 speakers have spoken and laid out their arguments for and against the motion. While our adjudicators are making their decisions, let's get some audience feedback. Audience judges, if you agree with today's motion, if you think the government should legalize voluntary euthanasia, please turn your lights on. If you agree with the opposition bench, please leave your lights off. Okay? All right, on the count of 3, please make your final decisions. 1, 2, 3. Let's do the count. Okay, so 27 for and 23 against. A very close call, so almost half and half. It's hard to decide which bench exactly won. So let's hear from our three judges again on how they saw today's debate. All right, Professor Joshua Park.
So I'll talk firstly about closing government. We heard a lot of vegetable and vegetarian and all sorts of interesting terminology to refer to euthanasia. I think all of you were referring to vegetative state or the state of being in a coma, right? So it's not a huge issue that'll turn the debate, but let's try to use the correct terminology. Government whip, I felt you did a good job of trying to clean up the debate as a whole. Your role isn't necessarily representing the entire government bench. Your primary role is to differentiate your team and explain why your team should be the best team in the debate, including opening government.
All right, so for the closing opposition, I think you girls were strong in terms of responses. I think you were able to at least point out and deal with all the materials that the government side were offering in today's debate. However, we felt that most of these responses were similar to the points made by the opening oppositions. So my point is that it would be wiser next time, especially if you're in a closing team, to pay closely attention to the materials of your opening and then look for areas that you can expand. If not, if you think that there's a new stakeholder that you can create an argument, then go for it.
As the other judges already pointed out, I think to some extent, both closing government and closing opposition spent a lot of time repeating the arguments that had already been made earlier, and sometimes repeating each other between members of the same team. And 5 minutes, is a very short period of time. So that means that you don't want to waste it on repetition when you can say new things or bring a different perspective or make a new or different point. There are lots of other things you could have brought, I think, to the table that perhaps were not fully explored.
All right, it's time for me to announce the top two teams of today's debate. Now, these two teams will go on to the semi-final round for a chance to represent Korea in the Northeast Asia Debating Championship. So, the top two teams are... Congratulations, Anyang Foreign Language High School and Sehwa High School. Congratulations. How do you feel, Sumin?
I was really nervous while I was giving my speech. So I realized that I was talking too fast and I was really worried about that. But overall, I think we did quite a nice job in talking of all the things that we prepared. I'm very proud of the results. Thank you.
And I thought that you were very passionate in your argument. Are you opposed to voluntary euthanasia in real life, or were you just assuming that position for the debate?
Well, I had the same debate in Korean in school last year, so
Okay.
I was actually really proposed about this motion because I was in the government side.
Right.
However, I was first a little bit surprised to receive the team that I'm in opposition, but after researching and thinking and making my ideas more clear, I thought that opposition could have many good arguments too.
All right. And you guys, how do you feel?
Well, I was really nervous, and I actually have a lot of stage fright, so I think I made a lot of mistakes, and I have to improvise a lot to go in the next round. Yes, but I really am happy I won. Thank you.
So a lot of things going on. Do you think that sort of hindered your preparation for today's debate?
I don't think it affected my performance that much, but it was a tiring day.
It is a tiring day, but well done. All right, regardless of the results, I'm grateful and I want to congratulate all 8 students for their hard work and effort today. All right, that's all the time we have left for today. That's it for the preliminary round. And next week, we begin the semi-finals with 16 teams. So the competition is going to be fiercer than ever before. So please do join us again. Thank you for tuning in and goodbye.